Hi, Adam. It's great to be on with the REIMAGINE conference, and happy to be here. I'm Stephen Pear, co-founder and CEO of BitPay. We're looking forward to the conversation.
Hello and welcome to Reimagine 2021. This is our 1-year anniversary and 10th edition of our conference. Super excited. We host these events as part of our monthly series, bringing you nothing but the best projects, bright minds, and leaders in the space. We've been fortunate enough to invite many talented individuals and teams to come speak with us, providing updates, insights, and all the above that's happening in crypto. I'll be your host today, Adam, from the Mousebelt team, where we focus on early stage investments through our accelerator. Or providing development support to a growing number of projects in the space, as well as education within the Mousebelt University program. Our main objective and goals across our platform, including Reimagine, is simple. It's increasing adoption, use cases, and real-world applications. We seek to educate our audience on blockchain by helping them understand crypto's real impact. So I'm super excited today. Enough of me talking. Great guest, great company, great leader in this space. Happy to get into it. Stephen Pear, CEO and co-founder of BitPay. How you doing? Welcome to the conference. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So we were kind of chatting a little bit before, and you know, it's kind of a real treat, really, when we're talking with somebody that's been in the space in some capacity for quite some time. And what I mean by that is kind of on the technical front, the engineering front. In terms of how blockchain is compiled, like what it is, how it works out. So before we get into BitPay and all that, talk to me about, you understand cryptography, you understand kind of the mechanisms. What were your thoughts? And people may not know this, but this has been attempted, this Bitcoin concept, this use case for blockchain, this killer app, really. But in the 90s, you saw some attempts. What were your thoughts when you were reading these things and kind of understanding the attempt at what, you know, in the 90s, like David Chaum and his team, what they were trying to do?
Yeah, well, I guess David Chaum and Digicash was what got me really interested in this area, specifically around the application of cryptography to the use case of payments. And, you know, I was a big fan of Digitcash. I never worked there or anything, but my roommates at the time will tell you I couldn't stop talking about it, and just totally fascinated by it. And I think leading up to that, it was my fascination with like PGP and what was going on with Phil Zimmerman, and really advanced cryptography. And just, I guess as a kid, I loved the concept of cryptography and the idea that you can, write something, encrypt it, send it across the world to somebody else, and they can decrypt it, and it can't be intercepted in between. And I just thought that was really cool, and it's kind of like the little kid that gets excited about the decoder ring in A Christmas Story, if you ever watched that movie. But just my interest in PGP, strong cryptography, what was going on politically with Phil Zimmerman, and that whole story, which I won't go too much into, but it's really fascinating. And then Digicast came out and was really trying to apply cryptography to create secure payment systems. And what David Chaum did there was really exciting. And Digicash was, I would characterize it as the world's first cryptographic payment system. For sure. And they got some good early traction. They had some bank partners and whatnot, but ultimately it wasn't a decentralized system. Ultimately, they failed as a company and went bankrupt, and the project went away with it, right? And so I think that got a lot of people thinking, how can you create a true protocol for payments, an internet protocol for payments that doesn't depend on like one centralized company to run it and to clear those transactions? And so I was very fascinated. Most of my career was in telecom, but I kept looking for projects that were doing something in this area, including like Ripple, not the Ripple that we know today, but the project that came before the company. And that for a little while caught my attention. And there were a lot of exciting developments in sort of the late 90s and early 2000s. So exciting in the sense that they generated media buzz, like Second Life. I don't know if you remember that platform and this 3D world, and it had a currency called Linden dollars. But it was ultimately a centralized ledger system. It wasn't anything interesting from a computer science perspective.
So you bring up kind of the centralization and decentralization aspect in these terms for Digitcash and some of these other projects and companies. Did they fail in terms of because in the end they were just competing with legacy systems, and it just was not enough oomph to get them over from an innovation standpoint? Now you're just kind of competing in the payment space. Is that because you bring up centralized, the centralization of it, which wasn't maybe unique, but some of the concepts of the cryptography, right? The pieces that we're formulating were obviously fascinating, but in the end, it wasn't enough to like tackle, the existing payment and rails and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you had to have something like Bitcoin and something decentralized like that to succeed at creating, a new novel kind of payment infrastructure.
Yeah.
In the case of, I mean, every company that's attempted this, and there's also like eGold, and eGold had for a while there, it was looking like eGold was going to dominate internet payments. People forget the history there, but they had legal issues and whatnot that came about. But but it was also a centralized system. PayPal's a system, and I think ultimately, there needed to be something like Digicash that would survive even when companies failed to get the traction that they needed, going from 0 to 1, as Peter Thiel kind of describes it. And they just don't achieve that sort of liftoff momentum. And having an internet protocol that can survive on its own without the need of a corporate sponsor, as it would be, I think was key to Bitcoin's success, certainly, but I think really necessary to do something truly novel and innovative around payments on the internet. And otherwise we're stuck just kind of building on top of existing rails and existing monetary systems that predate the internet and really weren't designed with the modern internet and the modern threat environment on the internet in mind. So.
And you bring up a lot of good things in terms of what the internet was used for, kind of the timeline that took for it to take off. I mean, obviously now the internet is where it is today. We build on top of it. We can put up websites pretty quick. You don't have to, there's applications to help and assist in ramping up and scaling. A lot of these things were back in the day. You had to, build it out from scratch and code. Do you see blockchain at the moment kind of in that little spot in terms of protocols and infrastructure being developed for us to kind of streamline innovation and development, like even further, like to the masses?
Oh, absolutely. And it's still extremely early because we haven't even scratched the surface in terms of applying this technology to practically everything we do in our lives.
Totally.
But it's funny, I won't date myself, but kind of started writing code in the 1970s now. And having seen the internet and all these different innovations come about and how long they took and how long it took for not just the innovation to happen, but then for it to get adopted and utilized. People forget. I remember when I went to college, at Georgia Tech, thinking how cool was it that Georgia Tech was connected to this thing called the internet, and that I had a real like internet email address. It wasn't like this AOL or CompuServe thing. It was actually on the real internet, and I could send an email to somebody at another university, for example. And I remember telling all my friends, this is going to be the future of communications. Everybody's going to everybody. And then I realized I didn't know anybody else that had an email address. But sure enough, you could see the future, and I see the same thing with Bitcoin and blockchains. Same thing with the web browser. I remember later in college, somebody in one of my classes saying, we're going to build an application around Mosaic, and this is going to be the future of building applications. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is just a tool to render a document on, in graphical form. But then, after you dig into it a little bit, you realize, oh yeah, this is this is going to be huge. And, that was probably in 92, 93, long before the web really took off in 95. But I see a lot of very similar things. In fact, I would say, Bitcoin and the blockchain and crypto industry is maybe much bigger than those. It's just the energy and excitement and all the different projects that are going on, all the innovation that's happening. It's hard for somebody like me who's been doing this for 10 years now with Bitcoin to keep on, to stay on top of the developments. It's moving so fast.
Yeah, and I want to touch on a couple things, and we'll come back to in a little bit. Talking about your email and being able to communicate with nobody on the other side. It's kind of the same problem which BitPay was kind of born out of. Was I have Bitcoin? How do I send Bitcoin? How do I transact with Bitcoin? Right in like 2010, 11, and we'll get into that with kind of the solution you guys are providing. But yeah, same kind of thought process or where we're at in time in the blockchain space as you were in the internet, of trying to leverage the tech and how do we use that tech, and we need to build it. And that's how you guys, eventually got started. So what about like from the early 2000s to Bitcoin? Did you think Bitcoin was going to come out, or maybe not Bitcoin specifically, but do you think the iterations, I was thinking about this, all the iterations, which is kind of standard, your Facebooks, all these attempts, right, had started years before. Nobody thought about Facebook, but there were these social platforms, MySpaces and these other ones, in the early 2000s that eventually led to Facebook being born. And I see Bitcoin was on that same trajectory. Iterations didn't work. You don't want to be the first or the last, right? And here we are. But in between kind of the late 90s to when, Bitcoin was launched through Satoshi, did people kind of give up this attempt? Did you think it was going to get over the hurdle?
I had kind of given up. I'm like, well, we're just never going to figure this out, right? You're always going to need somebody to clear payments on the internet. And, I was like, going from Digitcash in the early 1990s, that failing and sort of not seeing a lot happening, just through the late 90s and early 2000s. It just, I had pretty almost given up and just kind of stopped looking and stopped tinkering. And, like I at one point with the Ripple project I mentioned earlier, had tried to build a version of Ripple, but, which the idea behind Ripple was, it wasn't a new currency, but it was keeping track and ledgers of who owes other people what, and then finding pathways through the network to resolve those debt that people owed each other. And so I even tried, writing a version of that wasn't, the big problem I saw with that was it was kind of working, but it was all like on one server and not decentralized at all. But yeah, I had kind of given up, that maybe there just wasn't a way to do it. And you're always going to need that PayPal or Federal Reserve or something like that sitting in the middle of these transactions to ultimately clear them. I also got simultaneously very fascinated about the history of monetary systems and central banking and how that came about. And of course, all the conspiracy theories around that were fun and entertaining, and sometimes very upsetting, but that also just sort of grabbed my interest and kind of kept me just sort of in the background, while my career was going on, interested in this topic area. And Bitcoin came along, and I'd heard about it when it first launched on a Slashdot post or something, but the headline was like, run some software and generate money on your computer. And my economics brain told me that there's no way that can work. What's to stop people just, creating money at will, right? And it wasn't until a couple of years later, like late 2010 or so, that that's when I read the Satoshi white paper. Bitcoin was starting to rise in value. And I'm like, maybe this would be worth my time sitting down and studying. And then when I read the Satoshi white paper, it was, you come across these innovations as a computer scientist where it's like somebody just writes something and it clicks and it just makes total sense. And it's clear, it's concise. It's not like a 20-page PhD dissertation. It's just clear, to the point, this is how we should do it. And you read it and it's like, oh, why didn't we think of this 20 years ago? It seems so simple now. But that's the way, the Satoshi white paper was for me.
Which kind of leads into my next question. You kind of talked about it a little bit, like what made Bitcoin work in terms of, I mean, these are all proven concepts. The technology had been tested, years before, decades before. It's all just maybe just come full circle. But what do you think it was that made Bitcoin work from your lens, from your eyes?
Well, I wasn't sure it would work when I first got into it. And I dug into the code and actually did as a software developer, the code was kind of a mess. And my first instinct was to clean it all up and organize the project. And so I did that for a couple of months. And, but that actually was good because I kind of learned the code and convinced myself that it actually did what it was advertised to do, and it would work. But I think it was taking a lot of proven concepts off the shelf, elliptic curve cryptography, SHA-256 hashing, and putting it together. And I think maybe the key observation or the key innovation there was connecting money to energy, and specifically the proof of work aspect of it. I think that I'm really fascinated by the relationship of money and energy, and so I think the concept that you need to utilize energy to create a platform that's it's utilizing consuming energy in the present to create a platform that defers consumption and hence energy usage into the future, which to me there's a certain Zen quality about that. But I think, I just think pulling together a lot of proven concepts and thinking about the incentive structures, the game theory in it, was what made it ultimately, work. Whereas previous attempts at it were missing one piece or another to the puzzle.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It touches a lot of aspects of concepts, of ideas. And a lot of it have been tested, proven right in some way, shape, or form, and it all comes together. Are you worried about the energy aspects? Not to go too much derailed into like energy so much, but I know you mind, which is kind of cool. I feel like many,
that's the whole story in and of itself. Getting into mining, I miss those days. I loved mining for Bitcoin.
There's been a lot of individuals like yourself and leaders in the space that we're like, I just wanted to try this thing out, build my own rig, XYZ. I got burned out, or it didn't make sense, whatever the case is. But to have some skin in the game, to kind of see how it operates. Many kind of Bitcoin hodlers and holders and believers started that way. If not just buying it out of interest of understanding the concept, but actually knowing how to build a rig and getting into it. Real quick before we get into the money, are you worried about the energy this whole sustainability, making sure that we're not burning too much energy? Do you see any? I feel like it allows us to search for other renewables, other energy sources to keep this thing running.
No, I'm not concerned about that at all. I think market forces will find the exact right price to pay for a secure transaction in a blockchain. Ultimately, Bitcoin, as the block reward diminishes over time, miners have to earn all of their revenue from a fee attached to a transaction. And then the question is, how much are you willing to spend to put a transaction into the Bitcoin blockchain? How important is it for you to have that level of security that it provides? And there are applications that are going to need that level of security and will pay a very high price to get that transaction in that blockchain because they need the security. And for other applications, buying a cup of coffee may be either it's a layer 2 like Lightning, or it's another blockchain where it's not as secure, but it also doesn't need to be as secure, and you don't need to pay that high price for inclusion in that chain. I think the market will decide those things, and so ultimately the energy consumption of Bitcoin is going to be very much tied to the amount of the price that somebody's willing to pay to put a transaction into that blockchain and get that level of security. On top of that, it is changing the economics of renewables. Probably 5-6 years ago at I don't remember exactly when it was, like 2013 or 14. There was a conference in San Jose, like the first big Bitcoin conference. And somebody came up to me in that conference and said, I'm interested. He was interested in mining because it was a data center that could be turned off. I'm like, what do you mean? That was an interesting observation that I was curious about. And I asked him more about it. He said, yeah, what I want to do is I want to put mining rigs inside of a container and be able to move that container wherever there's excess energy. So think about a wind farm that has excess wind is blowing really strong and they don't have anything to do with that electricity. They could mine Bitcoin with it and earn revenue with that extra electricity. And that changes the economics of the renewables, right? It makes it more economically viable to run a wind farm if you can do that, or excess capacity coming through a dam, or excess, or another example he gave is a natural gas well. It's not a renewable, but it's a natural gas well that doesn't have right of way to pipe that gas somewhere. They can just put mining rigs on top of the well and operate those and make money off of that. And so I think it really does improve the economics of renewables, and then solar power as well, same thing. And I think people are, miners are always seeking the most cost-effective sources of energy, of electricity, and so I think they're.
And I guess that doesn't necessarily mean cheaper. It means, you're right, accessibility to energy.
Yeah.
Not only traditional energy pathways for cheaper, but like you said, other sources that we're all exploring anyway to kind of keep these rigs going.
Yeah, but the final one important point to all of that is that the production of energy is going to be is always decentralized, right? Because the sun shines on all parts of the planet, right? As long as the planet's rotating, we're going to get energy everywhere, and it's really just about becoming more and more efficient at converting that solar energy into electricity. And so when you think about solar panels and what companies like Tesla are doing and trying to drive that, the adoption of solar power, energy itself is becoming, or the production of energy is becoming more and more decentralized. I mean, if you think about if everyone put solar panels on their roofs, then that's very decentralized. And I think it really fits well with what you want to achieve with a system like Bitcoin, which is decentralization, and where it's a protocol that everybody can choose to participate in, but nobody controls it, right? There's not one person with their finger on the button controlling it.
Do you know when a lot of these massive mining operations started popping up? Like, you were in early, you've been following for a long time. And this is like, you won't spend too much time on it at all, but just curious, right? Like now they're going IPOs, right? Like a lot of these are businesses, companies, public companies. When was it and then everybody that I've talked to is running it down in the basement, trying to keep it cool, doing their thing, running around.
Been there.
Yeah, exactly. So when did like these operations start popping up, like these massive centers, facilities?
So when I got started with it, we were still using GPUs and graphics cards, and it was just starting to move to FPGAs. And then you started seeing some early companies start working on the ASICs and the customized hardware. And I think really right about that time when it started to become hardware optimized and the capital requirements raised, grew quite a bit from that. And it became really a race to get the next latest generation as the hardware caught up to Moore's law. I think right about that time, early 2011, maybe late 2011, was when you started to see people forming companies to do mining. And then you started to see mining pools. Those started right around early 2011 as well. Wow. So people can no longer mine solo. And, it would take, they might have enough power to maybe find a block once every month or something. And so, and that was longer than the 2-week adjustment period. And so you might start mining, and if you got lucky, you found something, but it may be a month or 2 months before you found a block. And so that necessitated people pooling their resources and creating these mining pools. And those were businesses as well. So that's, I think with the mining pools, with the move toward hardware optimized mining, that's when it started to become, you know, dominated by professional businesses, right? As opposed to the hobbyists running mining equipment in the basement.
Yeah.
But
No.
I go back to that, you know, if you see what China's done, and we should all thank the Chinese Communist Party for decentralizing the the mining in China.
Totally.
You know, they're breaking up a monopoly over there, doing a favor to all of us consumers. But if you look at that, where's all that mining equipment going to go? Maybe some of it's destroyed. A lot of it's probably going to get sold off. Some of it moved to subsidiaries that are overseas. Some of it I hear is coming to Texas and in the U.S. But I bet a lot of that goes back into people's basements too. And somebody could probably do something really innovative by creating a company designed to help a person and subsidize a person getting the hardware and running it in their basement and tying in, sort of like mining pool. You know, mining pools would obviously be an important part of that, but just financing the acquisition and doing a revenue share with people that want to run mining equipment in their home, or their maybe they got some type of a warehouse or something like that they have access to. But I think you might see kind of a lot of the actual mining return to, or become more decentralized in the future.
Yeah,
it may not be, scalable to try and put everything in these big, giant data centers.
Yeah. I think Argo blockchain kind of started that way as a mining or software as a service or mining, anyways. Now they're full blown into it, IPO'd, and it's kind of cool.
And maybe this stuff already exists. I've been out of mining for so long. I haven't stayed on top of the latest innovations from business model perspectives.
Yeah. I don't know too much about it, but it's definitely enough to talk about it. But it's definitely interesting. It's kind of cool. Years later, we have these big ass facilities and people operating. But are you still reading do you still read white papers?
When there's a good one and somebody tells me I need to read one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of out there though. So
yeah, exactly. I know it's kind of tough. And the other thing, so going back to 2011, where were you living? Were you in the West Coast or where you're at now?
No, I've always been from the Atlanta area. So I spent a little bit of time in San Francisco, but my family's here. And so I've always, in some ways starting BitPay was me creating the job that I wanted. As a computer scientist and software engineer, it's it's difficult to not get sucked into that Bay Area, San Francisco ecosystem. But even in 2011, Silicon Valley had no idea, no interest really in Bitcoin either at that time. So not only, and so Bitcoin caught my interest. I was at a point in my career where I really wanted to go back and either join a small company or, as it happened, start one. And this is really the fourth startup I've been a part of. And so in many ways, I just had to, if I wanted to work with Bitcoin, I had no choice. I had to start a company to do it because there was nobody that was going to hire me to do it at that time.
Did you go to a lot of, and the reason why I was asking where you were located, were you going to meetups, conferences? Obviously it's pretty small. So we host I've been hosting meetups for a few years, right? And I feel like I was late to the game in I came across it in 2013. I was working for the bank and and didn't really go down the rabbit hole until I went to grad school a year later. And then I remember my friends in class at that time were, you hear to this Ethereum, you hear about XRP, Ripple, Coinbase. I'm like, no, anyways, it's crazy how time kind of blurred that. And then before you know it, I'm in it and then I'm working in it. And it's, I wish I wasn't so busy back then, or maybe even the price of 2K was a little scaring me, right? Because I think I had seen it go. Well, you've seen it too, go from hundreds to thousands to back down, and you just never know what's going to happen. But were you going to meetups and conferences, and do you recall or meeting anybody that made it? Right, as started a company now.
I mean, the first conference that Tony and I went to was in 2011. In New York, and there was about 50 people there, and I think it was August of 2011.
Yeah.
But Gavin Andreessen was there. He gave a talk. I mean, I could rattle off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of them are still very involved.
Crazy.
John was there.
For sure.
And then Eric Voorhees designed BitPay's original logo. He was a graphic designer. I think he charged us like $65 or something, and we paid him in Bitcoin for it. So,
That's
so
awesome.
he went to the conference as well. And then, man, there's just so many. There's some people that have kind of retired. They struggled. They maybe had a business, tried to get it, didn't work, and then they're like, well, the Bitcoin price is just gonna.
What was the sentiment? What was the sentiment at these? These. I mean, you're talking about OGs, including yourself, like super excited, unsure. The lay of the land was you guys were building something from scratch, and like things have got shut. You're always worried about compliance regulation, but everybody you just named off like had a vision and kind of executed in some way, or did they have?
Yeah, I mean, it was exciting. I remember and fun. I remember Gavin was working at the time on pay to script hash and how are we going to do multi-signature transactions and I remember a group of people there at that conference just kind of getting in a room trying to figure out what the best path forward is. And Luke Jr. had one idea, another person had another idea. And, it was a lot of fun. I think the sentiment I would say was we're not sure where this is going to go, but it's kind of fun while we're doing it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Which kind of is going to lead me to BitPay now. You guys have one of the earliest companies to start implementing infrastructure, right? I'm curious. Well, first of all, explain to my audience what BitPay is, and then I have some questions in terms of like some other follow-up questions. But where are you at now? You're CEO of BitPay. What is BitPay?
So BitPay is a payments platform. So our basic thought back in 2011 was let's build a platform that a business could talk to, much like they talk to a credit card processor, and be able to allow their customers to pay, initially in Bitcoin, but now many other forms of crypto. And, just really present an API to them that was very familiar and worked like what they were accustomed to. And then we would talk to the Bitcoin network and deal with all the, intricacies of interacting with the blockchain. And we would give those businesses the option to get their payments settled in whatever currency they prefer. That could be Bitcoin, or it could be dollars, could be euros, whatever they prefer. And really focusing on the entire life cycle of a payment. So it's not just about the initial payment, but it's also how do you handle currency conversions? How do you handle refunds? If you think a business is processing thousands of transactions a day, they need tools to manage all of that and to then be able to reconcile those payments. So there's a lot to it that maybe somebody just making a payment doesn't really appreciate. So we're really focused on any type of payment that has a heavy workflow component to it. And then we support a lot of different, formats of payment, both in-person payments as well as e-commerce, email billing, or something as simple as putting a button on your website for a donation. We have a lot of tools that support all those different types of scenarios for payment. And then we also have the BitPay wallet. We didn't initially have a wallet. We originally wanted to partner with wallets, and we still do want to partner with wallets, but work with them to innovate on that end-to-end payment experience from when the consumer initiates the payment to when the business is receiving settlement for that payment, and everything in between, make it a great experience end to end. But we were having a lot of difficulty getting development roadmaps aligned with different wallets, and they had different priorities than we did. And then we also had our own operational needs. Our wallet is great at multi-sig transactions, and we built it from the ground up with a security mindset, and so we needed to manage our own operational funds as well. And so we built CoPay initially, and then later launched the BitPay wallet. And we can go to a customer like Microsoft or AT&T and show them a great, phenomenal, seamless end-to-end payment experience. It starts with our wallet and ends with the customer getting settled and being able to do all those things, managing currency conversions and refunds and so on. So that's really the bread and butter of what we do. We also do the inverse, which is payouts, and something we launched early this year or late last year was BitPay Send. So it allows a company to distribute funds to thousands of endpoints if they want. And use cases for that are companies that need to pay like affiliate fees, or a company doing payroll. They want their employees to be able to get a portion of their paycheck in crypto. So we're excited about that product as well. But yeah, we're essentially a service provider that enables companies to allow their customers to pay in crypto.
And we talked about this at the intro when you were first using your email, needing somebody, to send, communicate with somebody else. And same thing in the crypto, or, Bitcoin in 2011, when you guys launched, it's like, we have all these Bitcoins, we need to spend them, buy them, transact, and that wasn't there. And I feel like BitPay brought some credibility a little bit, to Bitcoin in terms of being able to use it, leverage it for everybody. And one thing that's interesting is like, so do you see Bitcoin as a transactional? Well, all of our ideas and thoughts have evolved, over the last, many years. But is it transactional to you? I feel like, how do you see people, like, do you think they want to spend their Bitcoin? I know you guys are providing the service to transact in it. What do you see? How do you see people like hodling, spending it? Like, where do you fall, I guess, in terms of what the future looks like for Bitcoin? Like, you gonna store it and hold it,
Yeah,
or try and spend it?
well, I feel like the dominant use case for Bitcoin is as a store of value.
Yeah.
It is for the person that wants to put value in the most secure platform and hodl. But people do eventually want to spend. And sometimes I joke that you're not a true hodler if you have anything else to spend but Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's the only thing you have, then you have to spend it to eat.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
at some point you do want to spend it. And we see that on the platform. Bitcoin, the average transaction value for a Bitcoin transaction versus everything else is about double what most of the other chains and currencies are.
Oh, wow.
And so people, when they do transact in Bitcoin, it's for higher amounts. Sometimes they're buying, exotic cars and yachts and things like that. But other times it's, paying rent or doing more, normal things, I guess. But it's usually in higher amounts. And we also have like the MasterCard that allows somebody to, maybe if they don't want to do every payment using Bitcoin or crypto, or they don't want to track their gains and losses every time they buy something, they can convert a larger amount every so often, infrequently, from Bitcoin into dollars on their MasterCard and spend it wherever MasterCard's accepted. You can also do pretty much the same thing with the stable coins that we support. So you can convert your Bitcoin into USDC and then spend it, spend USDC on smaller value transactions or more frequently. And that way you have fewer of those big, those transactions you got to track for, capital gains and tax purposes that, at least in the US, we have to do.
And how do you see some of the benefits on the merchant side? Like, are they doing it as a marketing play to accept, drive new customers, new clientele, or they just see it as an alternative method that people can come spend, whatever currency they have, fiat or crypto?
Yeah, merchants, if you ask them what they would like their customers to be able to pay in, they would say their answer would typically be everything.
Everything, yeah.
Whatever the customer wants to pay with. Of course, there are practical constraints to that. The merchant has to integrate with different payment methods, and if they sign up with BitPay, we've got a very good selection of different currencies that we support now. But yes, I think BitPay is unique as a company amongst payment processors in general. I'm not talking about just crypto payment processors, but I think we're unique in the sense that we partner with our customer and help raise awareness about their products and services among people that have crypto. And that is valuable to them. When we go and tell them that 30 or 40% of the people that pay with crypto are going to be new customers. That's powerful to them. They like the low fees, they like the no chargebacks, they like all the properties of the payment, but the really powerful selling points for us are that they're going to get new customers and new revenue, and it's incremental new customers, new revenue. It may be 1-2% of their checkout to start with, but as soon as we sign up that customer, our goal is to grow that to 5 or 10% of their checkout. And once you get above 3 to 5% share of checkout, then you're a sticky payment method. You're an important payment method for that merchant, and that's really what our goals are when we sign up our customers. Is
For
make
sure.
that.
Yeah,
And
no.
one things like launch. We just launched Litecoin last week. We went to Newegg and decided to do some promotions with Newegg to help raise awareness about Newegg among the Litecoin users and get them excited about it. And so that's the kind of thing we'll do in partnership with our merchant customers to really just drive new revenue for them.
That's good. You're collaborating, you're partnering, you're providing a value add to integrate.
Compared to a traditional like Visa, MasterCard payment processor who says, here's the API, have at it.
Yeah.
We really are incentivized to help drive meaningful revenue and new customers to that merchant.
How difficult was it to set all this up so early on? I remember being at the bank, and I remember when I was just learning about crypto early, and sure enough, like this crypto company came in, and we were setting up bank accounts and trying to get them business accounts, and I think we were able to get by, but there was some hesitation of receiving wires and deposits of it being held, frozen, shut down. And not only that, like regulation compliance, going back to me talking about credibility, I think like Bitcoin, the uneasiness or the perception of whatever scams, frauds, right? This dark world. And then to couple that with a service that wasn't following regulation compliance, like probably wasn't going to help anybody like to get adoption or understand, educate on the Bitcoin side. And I feel like you guys went the right way to navigate, not to say that it was easy or it was all there. I'm sure you had to figure out, how to get through it. But yeah, what was that journey like to kick off such an early crypto company and then have all of these standard operational needs and executing that to grow the company? Because there were years later, there were still companies being shut down and trying to figure it out and X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So getting bank accounts, keeping bank accounts has been a struggle for most companies in our industry. I think today it's not as big of a problem as it was, but you have to take compliance and regulations seriously. You can't just be have the mindset that you're just gonna whatever kind of thing. You have to take it seriously and treat it with and put the resources behind it that a bank.
You're still in the centralized world.
Yeah,
you can't just be like anti this, anti that. In the centralized world, you'll be shut down pretty quick.
I suppose until there's decentralized government of some kind. So you go to a bank and they want it. They have a lot of expectations on that front, and you have to meet those expectations. In our case, usually the reaction from our banking partners is that we're head and shoulders above even the traditional like money services businesses that they deal with, and so and we had to be. You're always walking into that conversation with all the skepticism that you were alluding to there, and so you have to be complete and thorough in your regulatory compliance programs. The regulations are not perfect, but they, for the most part, are reasonable and well-intentioned. And there are criminals out there, and we're not trying to build BitPay to, we don't want criminals abusing the software that we've been writing for 10 years. It's like we didn't build this to enable criminals. And so it's important to us, that and sometimes the regulations don't go far enough in certain respects in terms of risk mitigation and whatnot. So we sometimes will go above and beyond what regulations strictly require, just because it's important to protect our business, and we have to. Certainly on the cybersecurity front, we go above and beyond what the regulations require, just because it's a matter of life or death for a crypto company. When somebody hacks into your systems and steals Bitcoin, there's no bank you can go to and get that money back, right? It's gone.
Yeah.
It's not coming back. So.
No, yeah, and I forget who was or where I read it in terms of like the adoption of driving a car back in the day, right? Where regulations and the government got involved a little bit to put up stop signs and street lights, and then people started driving more, right? It was safer,
Yeah.
facilitate amongst that, and similar situation, right? Like we need some regulation, clarity, some guidance, not to stump innovation or shut it all down, because that doesn't do anything, but to kind of guide everybody in this kind of new emerging tech. A few more questions. Go ahead.
And you also, have to be careful though that the regulations aren't being motivated, or new proposed regulations aren't being motivated by competitive industries and they want to squash the innovation, right? So we have to be vigilant against that. And I'm not just saying us in the industry, but I'm saying the regulators and the politicians as well.
Exactly. Well, we're starting to see a lot of some support, some open dialogue, right, and across the board on some of the news channels and all that, which is good. Couple more questions here, and we'll kind of wrap this up. But I think you were trading back in the day, some options and stuff like that. Like, how do you see? Do you follow any like maybe DeFi at a high level, but decentralized option trading platforms? Like, does any of that interest you? Yeah.
Well, if you look at a BitPay payment, we give the buyer a 15-minute window of time to complete the transaction, and that locks in the exchange rate for that period of time. So that's really like a put option, right? Yeah. Like a micro put option. So all the way back in 2011, we were thinking, maybe a robust options market would be a great way to deal with this need to be able to lock in an exchange rate and give somebody an opportunity, a few minutes of time to be able to scan a QR code and complete that transaction. So yes, we've been trying to do things that would encourage the development of these markets, partnering with some of the early options platforms, and then over time just trying to use them, see how mature they are. The markets are still pretty thinly traded though, and not all that useful practically speaking to us today, but I think that they'll become more so in the future. Yeah.
And to what degree is BitPay decentralized or centralized? Like
BitPay,
non-custodial, non-custodial, or to what degree on the back end, front end?
The BitPay app is non-custodial, so your keys are in the app, and we support, as I mentioned earlier, multi-sig transactions. So if you want multi-device security, you can set up a shared wallet between multiple devices. So you got to go sign all of them, and then and we're trying to create a consistent user experience for that, from Bitcoin to Ethereum to all the different tokens that do support multi-sig transactions. But that can also be shared wallets too. So within BitPay, we use shared wallets between people. So multiple people that are required to sign off on transactions to move funds between different parts of the company. But yeah, so the BitPay app is decentralized in the sense that we're not storing people's keys, and that was by design. I mean, we didn't want to be a custodial provider way back in 2011, and that subjected us to an additional set of consumer protection regulations as well. And so we've always been very much about not your keys, not your coins kind of thing, right? Yeah. We're complete believers in that. The app is facilitated by server side infrastructure to be able to query balances and things like that. But we've actually designed the app so that people can download and run that server infrastructure themselves and point their app at a different server if they choose to, and they want the privacy and the security of that. But by default, when you install the app on the app stores, it's pointing at BitPay servers for that to be able to query the state of your wallets and whatnot. BitPay itself is a centralized service. You know, we have a pretty conventional architecture, but we're trying to think of ways we could decentralize everything that BitPay does, like the whole operation. And I'm really encouraging the team to figure out ways that we can do more of, you know, what we do on a public blockchain as opposed to in our own database. Yeah. Because I do think ultimately that even what we do becomes decentralized. So you know, I like to think of it in terms of how do you convert BitPay, the traditionally formed corporation, into BitPay, the blockchain. And I don't know that we'll ever get there, but we're going to try.
It's a process, though. You're totally right. The Coinbases of the world, you know, people are against it, but hey, we got to like, and you too, right? You have this service that we're so used to, or, you know, from the Web 2.0 side, traditional side, that's how you get users. You know, it's a transition, and nobody goes full decentralization right off the bat. Like that's like giving a kid with keys, you know, to go. And I think the process is in place and the infrastructure that you guys have, and you understand you know, you come from the background, so you understand the land of how, maybe how do we get there at the moment. You know, I think this direction to get people onboarded was needed, right? How do we iterate and operate with the browser, the wallet, getting used to the cumbersome kind of aspects of Bitcoin and of blockchain, and you guys streamlining that to onboard, you know, the masses. That's how we'll get more adoption.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was going to say I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, you know, we'll kind of wrap it up here. One other question. We've talked about Bitcoin this whole time. What about Ethereum? Do you follow other networks and other protocols? You're bullish. You like kind of the innovation, right, of these different layer ones that have come out, iteration, or what is it, like next generation blockchains? You super excited about some of these that have rolled out?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think a blockchain is a new kind of database technology, and it's going to disrupt all kinds of industries. Just go look at like you know, Ticketmaster blockchain. Go search the web on that, right, and you'll find tons of blockchains trying to disrupt Ticketmaster, which is a centralized database. It'd be great if Ticketmaster at some point, and Ticketmaster's not the only example. You know,
yeah,
Twitter, Facebook, everything will eventually be recast in a blockchain. Even Jack Dorsey's working on, you know, figuring out how you convert Twitter into a blockchain, right? Yeah. But you know, just search. People are trying to figure this out. People are trying to figure out how to do what traditional companies like a Ticketmaster does as a blockchain. And you know, I know there's sort of the Bitcoin maximalist camp, and you know, I agree that, you know, Bitcoin is a great store of value. It's the most secure blockchain in the world. And if you're going to hold value for a long period of time in a blockchain, that's the one to do it in. But there are all kinds of other use cases that this technology could benefit. And I think that having new blockchains with their own token, let's say you're going to create a ticketing blockchain. I mean, you might do that on Ethereum, but if you did it on your own blockchain with a new token used for the fees, and that blockchain gets adoption, then that token is going to go up in value. It's going to be a great investment as people start to use that blockchain, and just like Bitcoin was, right? And so I think there is room in this world for lots of blockchains that are tackling different use cases, and they're kind of purpose built for those use cases. I think you could do a Ticketmaster-like thing on Ethereum, but there's all kinds of other use cases that are there. And so if I make an investment in Ethereum, but I really want exposure to disrupting Ticketmaster, then that investment in Ethereum is sort of diluted. You don't have as much concentrated exposure to that one use case that you want to go disrupt. So as an investor, I want to see these kind of Ticketmaster type replacement blockchains. Yeah. But then there's the research questions that we talked about earlier, which is how do you secure them? You know, do they need to have their own token, or do you link it to another blockchain? Do you have a unique mining algorithm? Do you do proof of work or proof of stake? Lots of questions. Well, I don't think I know all the answers yet. Yeah.
And Ticketmaster did attempt to do a integrate blockchain, right? I think in the past.
Maybe they did. I don't know.
I think they did.
It came up in a conversation, and I used it as an example. I was saying, I wonder if there are any blockchains trying to do that.
Yeah.
like a dozen or two.
Well, no, I think they looked at it and they integrated it, but then I think the lead architect went to like DYDX or something.
Oh,
He already moved on. He moved out of Ticketmaster, but I remember.
well, for a company like Ticketmaster, if you did, I mean, they're in a great position to make that transition themselves because they have all the business relationships, right?
Yep.
And what they can do is put a blockchain in there and then say, rather than selling tokens to that blockchain, they should be mining it or validating it and earning the tokens themselves and inviting other people to participate in that. And rather than selling the tokens, they're actually buying the tokens and bringing them onto the balance sheet of the company. And then they can start moving more and more of what the company does in terms of their technology and their data over into that blockchain. And then the company's going to benefit and their shareholders are going to benefit because that token goes up in value. So a company like Ticketmaster is actually in an ideal position to be able to help this transition to a blockchain infrastructure happen. Right? You know, if we have all these connections and relationships with e-commerce systems and point of sale systems and different wallets, you know, have great support. And we support over 80 wallets on our platform. Then we'll be in a great position to convert ourselves into a blockchain, you know, if we figure out.
I got to follow up with them and invite them back.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah, I know we've gone way over our time here. You know, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully it wasn't too bad for you. Where can people learn more about BitPay?
BitPay.com. Very easy, or search for it in the App Store.
Awesome. So I have Stephen Perry here, CEO of BitPay and co-founder. It's been a real pleasure. We hope to, you know, your team has supported us in the past. It's great to have you on for the first time, but we appreciate, you know, you guys coming on and speaking. You know, we've gone through 10 events and you guys have been participating on a few of them. So we thank you there. We have a lot of viewers here that are tuning in, from industry professionals to students, developers, investors, all the above. And, you know, we try to provide as much content, not only within our crypto bubble, but outside of our crypto bubble as much as we can to help them understand like what we're all building here, what the purpose is, because the tech's complicated, but the use cases aren't, right? The way that we operate in our life, blockchain technology is going to, you know, be part of that stack somehow, some way, and we may or may not know it. And that's kind of the end goal. So, Stephen, thank you for joining. For all of you watching Reimagine, hopefully you had a good time. Feel free to catch this if you missed this, most of it on YouTube for free. We hope to have you back, and have a good one, Stephen. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be on.